an athlete from the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He must completely change his life with the arrival of World War II to become part of the army. That's why today I'm broken. If you enjoy the videos, support the channel by liking, subscribing, and enabling notifications. It's free and it really helps me to keep growing. Now, let's get started. This story, based on real life, begins during the World War II when a bombing mission flies over the ocean in order to detonate some bombs. But the enemies attack them during the mission. During the attack, Luis, the protagonist, attempts to close the bomb bay doors to stop the missiles from killing them. But these are jammed, and in the middle of the offensive, some of the soldiers are injured. The pilot discovers critical damage from the attacks, including brake failure. To make matters worse, the military base is a 5-hour flight away. Luis recalls a childhood memory of struggling to focus on the priest's words during Mass due to his tendency to get easily distracted. We then see them run as a police officer chases him until he reaches a place where he begins drinking alcohol and smoking. Soon after, a group of boys harasses him for being an Italian residing in the United States. A police officer saves Louis from a fight and takes him home, informing his mother about the incident. The boy continues to drink liquor behind his mother's back, despite her hitting him upon discovering his actions. During his brother's athletics competition, Louis is discovered again. He runs at full speed to avoid being caught. When his brother notices the boy's speed, he begins training and motivating him to ensure he grows up to be a productive person instead of a slacker. From the first competitions, our protagonist begins to stand out, and over time, he becomes a great athlete. Nicknamed the Tornado due to his speed, he improved over the years. And then we see him saying goodbye to his brother, because he will participate in the 1936 Olympic Games, which will be held in Berlin. Back to the present. We see that the aircraft's pilot decides to make a forced landing, even though this is extremely dangerous. Despite losing some companions in an earlier attack, they luckily manage to land safely. Later on, Louis sees that the pilot is praying and approaches him to ask if God has answered his prayers. Then we see him training on the island where he is with the rest of the soldiers, who encourage him to keep going. He is then tasked with rescuing the crew of another aircraft that crashed into the Canton Sea. And the team takes flight in the old plane where they received the attack. But halfway through the journey, the two left engines start to fail, and everyone begins to panic as the plane is about to fall into the sea. Just at that moment of terror, Luis remembers when the Olympic Games were inaugurated and his first competition. Meanwhile, his family listens to the race narration on the radio to follow our protagonist's debut. We see the other athletes gradually accelerating, leaving Luis behind. On the final lap, the boy remarkably accelerates, surpassing the rest to achieve first place and break a record. The soldier's aircraft crashes into the ocean and starts sinking. As a result, Luis's leg is trapped between a piece of the plane. After reaching the sea bottom, he frees himself and swims back to the surface. He finds that only two other crew members, Phil and Mac, survive besides himself. So together they climb onto a lifeboat where they try to treat the wound that the pilot has on his head. There, they find some chocolate bars and water, so Luis starts to organize the ration so that it can last them until someone finds them. The next day they wake up to the sound of an airplane, so Luis fires a flare and the others try to signal for help. The plane flies by without noticing them. Things worsen when they find out Max ate their limited supplies. As days pass, the hunger grows unbearable. And when a bird lands on the lifeboat, Louis doesn't hesitate to grab it by a leg to kill it. Everyone is willing to eat it, but upon doing so, they end up vomiting within minutes. Then, Phil comes up with the idea to use it as bait for fishing, and within seconds, they manage to catch a fish that they eat nutritiously. While they talk about a crew that also got lost, and even though they survived, they ended up going crazy. When 18 days lost at sea are fulfilled, we see the boys affected by sun rays and lack of water. At night, Louis and Phil look at the stars while they talk about God's purposes. And that dawn, a strong storm stirs up the seawater. Terrified, everyone clutches the ropes as Louis promises God, surviving the ordeal. I vow to dedicate my life to you, Daniela. The rain wakes the three soldiers at dawn. and they excitedly open their mouths to drink after days of dehydration. Later on, Lewis catches a small shark that was circling the lifeboat and kills it with a knife to finally eat again. On day 27, Phil realizes that 4 days ago they surpassed the record of the lost crew that went mad. And then a plane flies over them, so Luis fires the flare again. This time, the plane turns back and the 3 soldiers are excited because the nightmare is finally over. But when the aircraft approaches them, it starts shooting at them because they are the enemies. So the boys jump into the sea to protect themselves from the gunfire, but they must return quickly because a shark starts chasing them. To make matters worse, the plane returns to shoot at them again, prompting only Luis to leap back into the water. Upon resurfacing, the protagonist returns to the life raft, concerned about his companions who have miraculously survived. The problem is that the life raft is deflating due to the gunshots, and when they are applying patches to inflate it again. A shark attacks them, but Mac successfully defends himself. Days later, Mac begins to weaken, and even more so due to lack of water, and unfortunately, the arms of his 2 companions die. The boys then cover his face and release him into the sea. Quickly, the 2 surviving friends reach 45 days lost at sea, and the lack of food has them very weak and quite thin. 2 days later, they fortunately wake up near a large Japanese ship. However, they end up imprisoned. Then they are taken to a prisoner of war camp where they are interrogated and tortured. From an old newspaper photo, the Japanese identify Luis as an Olympic athlete. And when he asks about his companions, soldiers from the island tell him that they were all beheaded. Days later, they are forced to strip and kneel to be doused with cold water. The prisoners, including Phil and Luis, are transferred to a Tokyo concentration camp where they are separated. When our protagonist's group arrives at the new camp, they are greeted by Corporal Watanabe, who tells them that they are enemies of Japan and will be treated as such. Then Luis approaches to tell him to look at him, and when our protagonist does, the corporal hits him in the face. Luis looks into his eyes 2 more times, receiving blows that break his nose. Watanabe then orders him to stop looking at him and departs. That night, his group meets the other prisoner soldiers, where an American commander is seen without nails, indicating he was tortured. The next morning, Watanabe says that there is a lot of talent among the prisoners, as there is an opera singer, a renowned Australian chef. He wonders who the Olympic athlete is. Luis is forced to compete with a Japanese boy across the field after raising his hand. But Luis, being weak and malnourished, quickly falls to the ground. Still, our hero stands up to persist, and upon falling again, Watanabe assaults him, declaring that he is worthless. Luis later finds out that other prisoners are duplicating maps stolen from the Japanese. In the following days, amid heavy work, everyone collaborates to hide more food and confidential information from their enemies. But shortly after, some Japanese military find part of some maps on the bed of one of the prisoners. So they punish him with a beating in front of everyone. Late at night, a Japanese man forcibly takes Luis to Watanabe, who tells him that the media are talking about him because he is someone famous, but everyone thinks he is dead, including his relatives. That's why they propose he go to a radio station to tell his family he's alive and being treated well. Both his brother and his parents hear his voice after 2 years, and then they take him to eat at a restaurant as a reward. Because of this, they give him a script that he must read on the next radio show, criticizing the United States in return for food and freedom from the prison camp. But Louis refuses, so they lock him up again. Upon returning, Watanabe acknowledges his strength, but still considers him Japan's enemy. So he receives him with a beating that this time will be given by each and every one of his fellow prisoners. Do it, sir. Let's go. The next day, the prisoners organize a play. For the first time in a long time, the American soldiers enjoy themselves and laugh again. Watanabe approaches the protagonist and informs him of his recent promotion and impending transfer to a new location. The Japanese man then asks Luis to congratulate him, but Luis stays silent. And when he leaves the place, the prisoners feel a bit of joy because they believe they will be more at ease without him. But shortly after, the Allies begin to bomb the place where they are, so the prisoners are evacuated to another camp. Surprisingly, Watanabe is revealed to be in charge of this new place. There, they start doing complex work, transporting coal, while enduring constant mistreatment. They also learn that the United States president has died, leading the prisoners to believe they are losing the war. Another day, Watanabe forces Lewis to carry a heavy beam, which he must keep over his head, as if he lets it fall, he will be shot. The other prisoners keep watching Louis because, despite his frailty and malnourishment, he strives to endure with his utmost effort. As time passes, the protagonist keeps lifting the beam, and when he meets Watanabe's gaze, he raises it even higher, surprising the Japanese man, who quickly gets annoyed and decides to hit him again until he is unconscious. The following day, the Japanese inform the prisoners that the war has ceased and invite them to bathe in the river. But everyone starts to believe they will be shot. Suddenly, an Allied plane flies over them, and we find out that the Japanese really did surrender, which means that the war finally ended, so everyone starts to celebrate. The first thing the prisoners receive are food supplies and magazines of all kinds. Louis walks around until he reaches what seems to be Watanabe's room. While there, the protagonist sees a photo revealing the Japanese man's father is a cruel dictator of the country, explaining his own cruelty. Lewis returns to the United States shortly after, greeted by family and the press following years as a prisoner. Before the movie ends, we can see the photos of the real Louis Zamperini, who got married in 1946 to a woman named Cynthia, with whom he had 2 children. Phil also survived the war and also got married. He and Lewis maintained their friendship for a long time after the war ended. As for Watanabe, he remained hidden for years because he was considered a war criminal, until the United States granted him amnesty during negotiations to restore relations with Japan. All this situation led Louis to suffer severe traumatic stress for years, and he fulfilled his promise to serve God. His faith guided him to choose forgiveness over revenge as he went back to Japan to reconcile with his captors. Except with Watanabe, who refused to meet with him. Louis fulfilled his dreams in 1988, at his 80 years of age, and he ran again in the Olympics that year, which were held in Japan. And finally, we learned that he passed away in the year 2014. This was unbreakable. Don't forget to like, comment on what other movies you want to see on the channel, subscribe, and activate the bell so you don't miss the upcoming videos.